All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So on behalf of the Environmental Finance Center Network, welcome to another webinar in our CWSRF virtual workshop series on assessing financial condition to prepare for the SRF application. So my name is Avery Davis, and I'm from the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center. And before we jump into today's presentation, I have a couple housekeeping items, but then we'll begin shortly. During the webinar today, everyone will be kept on mute to ensure audio quality. If you have a question at any point during the session, please type it into the GoToWebinar question dialog box anytime throughout the session. We will be saving your questions for a facilitated Q&A at the end of the presentation. After the webinar, you will all receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording and other information you may need. You can also download the slides from today in the Handouts tab in your GoToWebinar control panel. This webinar has not been submitted for pre-approval of continuing education credit, but all eligible attendees will receive a certificate of attendance for their personal record. To receive a certificate for this session, we ask that you attend the entire webinar and register and attend individually using your real name and unique email address. We do not accept group viewing credit at this time. Certificates will be sent via email within 30 days of the webinar date. And if you have any questions or need assistance, you can contact us at smallsystems@syr.edu. Now, before I introduce our speaker for today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Environmental Finance Center Network. So we provide training and technical assistance to small water and wastewater systems in all U.S. states and territories through our building technical, managerial, and financial capacity programs. If your community or utility needs assistance with drinking water, wastewater, or even decentralized system management, please feel free to contact us through our request form, which I will be sharing shortly in the chat. And on that note, I would like to introduce our presenter for today. So joining me is Melanie Sanchez, who is a project director at the Environmental Finance Center at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So welcome, Melanie, and I'm handing everything over to you.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone on the East Coast, and good morning to everyone on the West. As you can see, we have our closed captions on, so hopefully you can follow along if you don't understand what I'm saying. My name is Melanie Sanchez, and I'm a project director at the University of North Carolina's Environmental Finance Center. So at the UNC-EFC, our goal is to help governments and utilities provide environmental services fairly, effectively, and in financially sustainable ways. The UNC-EFC is a part of the larger EFC network, and we mostly focus on water, wastewater, and stormwater. So far, all of you have hopefully been able to attend some of the other sessions and the CWSRF funding process virtual workshop series. So far we have talked about what CWSRF is and why you should care, the bipartisan infrastructure law, why CWSRF funding is desirable, and what type of projects are eligible for CWSRF funding. And that leads us to today's topic of how to assess a utility's financial condition in order to prepare for SRF application. And so first, we just want to gauge how many of you have actually been able to attend the webinars, whether you've attended them all, at least one, so one or more, but not all of them. And then the last option is no, you haven't attended any of them.
Let's launch the poll. We have about 60% who have responded, so I'm going to leave it up for probably 20 more seconds. Okay, and I don't really see that number increasing anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and close it in 3, 2, 1. And there are your results, Melanie.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I just wanted to gauge kind of where the knowledge is at this point, but for anyone who hasn't attended webinars, I just want to let you know that we are going to go over some of the past topics, so you should still be good to learn. Okay, so today we're going to get an overview of the State Revolving Fund program and its significance in financing infrastructure projects. And then we'll move on to understanding financial benchmarks used by SRF administrators, and then finally move on to how you can conduct a thorough assessment of your organization's financial statements, ratios, and trends, and then overview general resources and support and let everyone ask questions if they have any. So the first thing I would like to touch on are just some highlights from past sessions so we can really reframe what we're talking about here in regards to moving forward with your CWSRF application. So the Clean Water State Revolving Fund program is a vital federal state partnership that offers communities low-cost financing for a diverse array of water quality infrastructure projects, including financial assistance for wastewater facilities, including the upgrade, expansion, or construction of wastewater treatment plants. These projects are going to aim to improve treatment processes, enhance the capacity of existing facilities, or develop new treatment plants to ensure effective management of wastewater. The second here, and you can follow along with my little pointer. Non-point source pollution control projects focus on addressing pollution from diffuse sources such as agricultural runoff, urban runoff, or construction site runoff. The CWSRF program supports initiatives like erosion control measures, vegetated buffers, and best management practices to mitigate non-point source pollution. Decentralized wastewater treatment systems, which include on-site or small-scale treatment systems, which are crucial in areas where centralized wastewater infrastructure is impractical or cost prohibitive, which allows communities to effectively manage and treat wastewater at a local level. The CWSRF program provides funding for stormwater runoff mitigation projects, and these initiatives are aiming to manage and reduce adverse impacts of stormwater runoff on water quality. Funding can be used for the construction or enhancement of stormwater management systems, such as detention or retention ponds, green infrastructure projects, or other innovative approaches. So I just mentioned green infrastructure projects, and those are also eligible for CWSRF funding. They help to use natural systems like rain gardens, bioswales, or permeable pavement. And then the second to last thing I want to talk about is estuary protection, which are also eligible. These projects focus on preserving and restoring health of estuarine ecosystems, including protection of wetlands, coastal habitats, and reduction of nutrient pollution. And then that leads us to water reuse projects. And these initiatives are focusing on treating and reusing wastewater for non-potable purposes like irrigation, industrial processes, or groundwater recharge. So some benefits of the CWSRF are improved water quality. So primary goal of SRF is to enhance water quality by supporting projects that reduce pollution and protect human health and the environment. So by providing financial assistance for infrastructure upgrades and modernization, SRF can help communities improve wastewater treatment and stormwater management systems, which reduces discharge of pollutants into water bodies. Second point here I have is public health protection. So supporting improvement of drinking water systems, we can help ensure delivery of safe and clean drinking water to communities, and this contributes to public health protection by reducing risk of waterborne disease and contamination. Another benefit of the SRF is that CWSRF provides low interest loans, loan guarantees, and other financial assistance to eligible entities. This enables communities to undertake infrastructure projects that they might not have been able to afford otherwise. These projects create jobs and stimulate economic activity, benefiting local economies and industries associated with water infrastructure development. Cost savings. So they offer loans at below market interest rates, which make a cost-effective financing option for communities. Accessing low cost capital, communities can reduce overall costs of infrastructure improvements and potentially pass on their savings to their ratepayers. Flexibility and local control. So CWSRF program provides states, tribes, and territories with flexibility in deciding how to use the funds to address their unique water infrastructure needs. This local control allows communities to prioritize projects based on their specific challenges and goals. So, you know, Arizona and Florida are going to have much different goals and needs, and that's why funding money is being passed over for states to delegate. CWSRF promotes collaboration among various stakeholders, including government agencies, utilities, nonprofits, and community organizations. And by bringing together these diverse entities, the program encourages partnerships and knowledge sharing, which fosters innovation and best practices in water infrastructure management. Environmental sustainability, right? So they're supporting projects that promote sustainable and environmentally friendly practices. And then the last benefit that I have on this list is compliance with regulatory requirements. And CWSRF assists communities in meeting these regulatory requirements and standards that are set by federal and state agencies. So by providing financial resources for infrastructure upgrades, the program helps communities maintain compliance with environmental regulations and helps avoid penalties and potential legal issues. So overall, CWSRF plays a crucial role in protecting water sources, improving infrastructure, and promoting public health. Its financial assistance helps communities address water quality and infrastructures while fostering economic growth and remaining sustainable. So that's the one last thing I want to talk about before we move on, is that CWSRF operates as a revolving loan fund, meaning that loans provided to communities are repaid over time on a revolving loan fund. And as borrowers make loan repayments, these funds are returned to the CWSRF, which allows them to be lent out again to other communities. This revolving nature of the fund ensures a continuous source of capital for future projects. Okay, so the CWSRF program has been instrumental in providing financial support for water infrastructure projects across the US. So this is a little bit outdated, but as of 2021, the program had secured an impressive $153.6 billion in funding. And through the CWSRF program, there have been 44,555,000 loan agreements executed as of 2021. And the majority of those loan agreements are going to small communities. Around 30,000 of those 44,000 were to small communities. And then the recent passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, or bill, has brought additional funding and new opportunities to further enhance SRF program. The bipartisan infrastructure law includes an infusion of $11.7 billion in general funding for the CWSRF program over the span of 5 years. Recognizing the importance of addressing emerging contaminants in our water supply, the bipartisan infrastructure law allocates $1 billion specifically dedicated to tackling that issue. So the funding, that $1 billion of funding supports research, monitoring, and implementation of effective strategies to combat emerging contaminants. And then lastly, the bipartisan infrastructure law ensures that 49% of state capitalization grants are set aside explicitly for small and disadvantaged communities. And this provision aims to promote access to funding and prioritize the water infrastructure needs of communities that may have historically faced challenges in securing adequate resources. SRF for small communities. So I'm going to go over some pros and cons. So starting with the pros, the SRF programs do often have streamlined application processes compared to other funding options. This simplifies overall funding process for small systems. And then unlike traditional financing methods that require cities to issue bonds, SRF programs provide an alternative funding source. And this eliminates the need for cities to jump through hoops and go through the complex process of issuing bonds. The third bullet point, so SRF loans typically offer competitive interest rates, which are lower than those available through other financing options. And this helps small systems to borrow funds at more affordable rates. Potential for additional subsidies. So SRF programs often come up with the possibility of additional subsidies or grants, and these subsidies can help further offset project costs, which make it more financially feasible for small systems to undertake necessary infrastructure improvements. Some SRF programs provide planning and design grants, which help small systems cover that initial cost associated with project planning and design. And this can be particularly beneficial for systems with limited resources because it allows them access to professional expertise without incurring significant upfront expenses. 6th bullet point down, so SRF programs do not have a minimum loan requirement, making them, this is flexible and allows small systems to secure the funds for their specific infrastructure projects, regardless of size. And additionally, SRF programs often allow leveraging, which means that systems can use the loan as collateral to secure additional financing from other sources. This enables small systems flexibility to undertake more extensive infrastructure projects. And then the last bullet point under pros, so state SRF agencies often work collaboratively with other funding entities to minimize costs, and this coordination can result in cost sharing opportunities and much more favorable financing terms. So with those being said, let's move on to the cons of SRF for small communities. So SRF loans may come with certain conditions and requirements that must be met by the borrower. These conditions can include compliance with specific regulations, reporting obligations, and adherence to certain standards. Small systems need to carefully review these requirements and ensure that they can fulfill them before actually committing to an SRF loan. The first bullet point under some strings attached talks about the Davis-Bacon wages, and the Davis-Bacon Act mandates that contractors and subcontractors pay prevailing wages on federally funded projects, which include SRF funded projects, and SRF projects often require compliance with Buy American provisions, and those are going to mandate the use of domestic materials in infrastructure projects. And that's great because we're supporting domestic industries. However, it does limit options available to small systems and typically will increase project costs. The second main bullet point, so the term of a SRF loan may be shorter compared to other funding options. As a result, small systems may face higher periodic loan payments, which can strain their financial resources. So some states have a maximum loan term of 20 years, while others offer longer terms of up to 30 years. In contrast, certain loan programs such as rural development may provide loans with terms of up to 40 years, which results in lower periodic payments. However, one thing to note about this point is that a lower periodic payment may make the total cost of the loan more expensive. And the last bullet point up here, when you're considering a loan term, small systems must assess the expected lifespan of their infrastructure. So if the infrastructure is expected to last longer than the loan term, it may be necessary to secure longer term financing options to align with that expected lifespan and avoid the need for refinancing in the future. The last thing I want to address before moving on to financial benchmarking is addressing the question, who is eligible? So projects seeking CWSRF funding must meet the program's eligibility requirements, demonstrate a clear water quality benefit, comply with applicable federal and state regulations, and be technically feasible and financially viable. So to determine specific eligibility and requirements for CWSRF funding, it's recommended to consult with your state's environmental agency that's responsible for administering the program. Or you can visit EPA's website for more information, but as you can see on this slide, both left and right sides are eligible for CWSRF. So public, private, nonprofit, non-community, and new community water, wastewater systems, local government units, nonprofit entities, watershed groups, HOAs. Again, it depends on the project and it depends on the state. So eligibility has a lot to do with financial benchmarking as well as all of the other things that we've discussed up to this point. Putting in an application can be a lot of work. So you want to be in a good financial position. You want to understand where your utility stands and make sure that you have a competitive application before you put in the work of applying. And that's what this whole webinar is about, right? Self-assessing how your utility is performing financially so you can be prepared for that SRF process. So some of you may be asking yourself, what are these financial benchmarks? And financial benchmarks provide quantifiable measures of performance that allow us to assess the operational and financial health of utilities. And these benchmarks help us measure progress, evaluate operational performance, set goals, and attract investment. By monitoring these benchmarks, we can determine whether or not a community is considered financially healthy, and if not, what steps they can take to get to that point. So the reason that we care about financial benchmarks is because we can get a holistic picture of utility performance and needs that are essential for effective water utility management. Additionally, they allow us to set future goals, inform capital planning, assess affordability, and explore financing options. By considering these aspects, we can ensure the sustainability and resiliency of water utilities while meeting those evolving needs of the communities that they serve. So we're going to delve into the following financial performance metrics in the next slides, which are operating ratio, debt service coverage ratio, days cash on hand, quick current ratio, and asset depreciation. All of these financial performance metrics help us answer the questions: is your system self-sufficient? Are you able to cover your debt service after paying for your day-to-day operations? If your customers stop paying their bills, how long can you maintain operations? Can your system meet its short-term obligations? And finally, how much of your utility's expected life has already run out and how much is left? So let's start with operating ratio. So to calculate this benchmark, you take the total operating revenues and divide by total operating expenses. If you look at this ratio, then you'll know you want your operating revenues to at least exceed the operating expenses in any given year. So you want a ratio of at least 1. And this is saying that your operating revenues are larger than your operating expenses. So what's coming in is greater than what's going out. And you can calculate the operating ratio 2 different ways, with and without depreciation. So if you include depreciation, this number will tell you whether or not in a fiscal year, if you had enough revenues to pay for operation and maintenance and put aside enough money to pay for assets that are depreciating in value and physical condition. If you do not include depreciation with this calculation, then you are only asking whether or not the revenues coming in were enough to pay for your O&M costs and nothing to do with your assets that are actively aging. And again, operating ratio is answering, is your system self-efficient? So now that we have a general idea of what your operating ratio is, I want to delve deeper into what operating revenues and operating expenses are made up of. So your total operating revenues for water and wastewater enterprise funds typically means your water and sewer charges. It's going to include things like your rates, your late fees, your penalties, connection fees, tap fees, all the rates and fees and charges that you charge your customers directly all go into total operating revenues. And then total operating expenses includes all of the expenses that you have, all the expenditures that you have for operations and maintenance. So that includes supplies, salaries and benefits, overtime, if you're paying taxes or insurance, and all those day-to-day expenses or year-to-year expenses are included. And it can also include depreciation depending on what question you're trying to answer, right? Now, what operating expenses do not include are things like debt service costs, as well as any kind of reserves that you may be building up for future capital projects. Depreciation is an accounting solution for aging infrastructure. It assigns a cost every year to your infrastructure wearing out as a percentage of its value. This money can be put aside to pay for future capital replacement. So the images on the right are what not budgeting for depreciation or budgeting for capital investments look like. Infrastructure wears out over time, and there's no money that is being put aside in a fund to pay for replacing these assets. At some point, the assets will fail and you can't provide that service anymore if you're not budgeting. So by not budgeting for depreciation or for comprehensive capital investments, rates and fees may not have to be raised to balance the budget, but the assets won't last forever and it will be very expensive to fix on short notice with no reserves to pay for the infrastructure. The value of an asset has three components. So replacement value, which is the main topic that we're going to be talking about, current value, and historical value. So replacement value is going to be the cost of replacing that asset with the type of asset that the utility desires to use. It's important to remember that not all assets are replaced by like assets. So for example, the utility might have a cast iron pipe, but will replace it with PVC pipe. And then in this case, the utility would want to use the cost of the PVC pipe and not the cost of a cast iron pipe. As a whole, depreciation is the loss of value over time of an asset, not restored by current maintenance. Depreciation is an economic fact for any water or wastewater system and pretty much everything you buy, right? If you buy a car now, it's not going to be worth the same amount in a few years as you drive and use up the lifetime of the vehicle. And then lastly, depreciation is the value that is lost from both declining physical factors and functional factors as well. If your utility is budgeting for future expenses and you have a capital improvement plan and you know what your needs will be, then you should be budgeting O&M and all the capital investments you are expecting to be paying for. If you don't do that, you don't have a capital improvement plan or an asset management plan, then you should at least be trying to budget for depreciation. Fully funding depreciation means that by the time the asset is scheduled to wear out, you will have saved the purchase price of the asset. That way you are generating enough revenues to save for replacement of some of the assets that you have. In terms of where you should be, slash should want to be is you want to have operating ratio with depreciation. Again, I'm going to say it, operating ratio with depreciation to be above 1. However, I would argue that you want it to be above 1.1 or 1.2. And this is because when you're depreciating assets, you're depreciating them on past purchase prices. So that pipe that you laid down 30 years ago and you're depreciating on it, if you try to replace that pipe today, it's going to be more expensive at that replacement value that you're depreciating on. So even when you're meeting your O&M expenses and your depreciation, it may not be enough to pay for the actual replacement of your assets going forward. So aiming higher for an operating ratio of 1.1 or 1.2 might be a better target for this. And if you're looking for a good ratio for 1 without depreciation, you definitely want to be much higher than 1 because this ratio does not include anything at all regarding capital, whether it's debt service or future capital investments. It's just looking at operation and maintenance, and you want to make sure that you're not just budgeting just for those. You need to be watching for capital as well. So the second metric that we're going to talk about is debt service coverage ratio. This one is for those of you with debt service. You need to be able to generate enough revenues in a year to pay for operation and maintenance, O&M, and principal and interest payments. Your revenues each year need to exceed this total sum. This metric is calculated by the funders and the debtors. It's a very common metric in the finance world. And in fact, we're going to talk about Georgia's requirements for SRF funding, which includes debt service coverage ratio. The debt service coverage ratio is calculated by taking the operating revenues and subtracting all the operating expenditures, excluding depreciation. And then finally, you're going to divide it all by the principal and interest payment. Days cash on hand gives you an idea of how long you can continue to pay for operation and maintenance without any additional revenues coming in. So how much reserve do you have that can pay for your operations and maintenance costs at any time? And to calculate this, you need to know what your unrestricted cash and cash equivalents are. What do you have in the bank that's not being restricted for use for some other purpose? And that's going to bring me to what is restricted cash. So some of the cash in the bank for the enterprise funds might be restricted through bond covenants to pay for principal and interest or to reserve a security for your debt. You may even have a capital reserve fund that puts some of these funds aside and reserves them just for capital projects. And you can't dip into those restricted funds to pay for O&M. You can only use them for their specific purposes. So you need to form in your financial statements what your unrestricted cash is, and this money is in the enterprise fund that can be used for anything. So to calculate this, you're going to take that number, unrestricted cash and cash equivalents, and you're going to divide it by an average daily operating and maintenance cost. Operating expenses excluding depreciation, and then you're going to multiply that by 365 days a year. And this gives you a ratio that is literally the days of cash on hand. It's the number of days that the cash that you have on hand can pay for your operating and maintenance costs without any additional revenues. And typically we say to aim for a few months, several months, but here we have 6 months. So I want to keep this slide relevant to this conversation, and I mentioned that we're going to talk about this. So this is a state requirement for Georgia when you're applying for SRF, right? So the main point I want to make is that this, in general, like all states are going to have different requirements. Not every state has this specific of a requirement, but a lot of states will be looking at your debt service coverage and whether you are in the right financial place to pay back the SRF loan. So here you can see that there are additional requirements that you would have to have if you have a debt service ratio of less than 1.05, and then a different set of requirements if you're between 1.05 and 1.25, and then if you're 1.25, it's going to be the easiest and most competitive. So now we're going to move over to the financial health checkup tool, which is what we're going to use to assess your financials. A couple of notes that I want to mention before we move on to the financial health checkup tool is that the UNC EFC has developed a suite of tools that may be helpful when considering a loan. Financial health checkup tool is this first one here, and today I'm going to walk you through that. You can refer back to the recording of the April CWSRF presentation where my colleague Kristen Downs highlighted the subsidized loan calculator and the affordability tool. So these two here. But today we are going to focus on the financial health checkup. Again, you can find it by going here for the most up-to-date version in our resources and tools. And our financial health checkup tool analyzes our 5 years of financial audits. It's important to note that we have 2 versions right now. You guys are going to be seeing the first demo of our new online version. However, if you ever have any difficulty with the online version, you're always welcome to access our old Excel version. I know a lot of people have a better time with that. However, I know a lot of people don't have Microsoft Suite, and in my opinion, the online version is very user-friendly. I'm going to open that now. Okay, so one last thing before we get started is that, can you see my screen?
Yep, everything looks great.
Amazing. Okay, so this is our new financial health checkup tool, and just know that we are making more upgrades as we speak. Like I said, you guys are going to be the first public group to ever see this, so it's very exciting. So getting acquainted with the homepage, you can see here, welcome to the financial health checkup tool. Here are the financial fields that you will need to input into this tool, and these are the financial indicators that will be outputted. If you have any questions on what these financial fields are or what financial indicators are, this is a great 10-minute video on financial benchmarking for the water industry, and it's very, very helpful. So what does this tool do? The tool is going to assist us in assessing financial performance of water or wastewater utility fund. The financial data should be readily available in annual financial statements, and for North Carolina, they are preloaded into this tool. So once you enter your financial statements, it's going to compute financial indicators that measure a variety of important metrics, such as the ability to pay debt service, availability of cash to pay for operations and maintenance, the sufficiency of revenues generated, and much more. Each metric is going to be compared against a target that you specify. Who should use this tool? Anyone can use the tool, but it was designed to be used by utility professionals, governing body members, government staff, and NETA providers working with small water systems. So the first question that you have to ask yourself is whether or not you are a North Carolina utility. So I'm going to show you what it looks like if you're a North Carolina utility first, and then we'll go into out of state. So I'm going to select where I live, which is Raleigh. And then there are two options. So you can either do the online form, which we clearly recommend, or you can do the Excel spreadsheet. With the online form, it's a lot more user-friendly. You just input everything into there. And with the Excel spreadsheet, you have to download a template, input your financials, and then re-upload it to the tool. I'm going to take you through both, but again, I recommend the online form. Okay, so the first thing you're going to see is an instruction tab. So first we're going to complete the financial history form, then we're going to set our financial targets, and then we'll be able to see the dashboard. If you have any questions when you're on the financial history form, you can either press this question mark or you can go to the help tab. Again, you can access the financial history form by hitting next or by literally clicking on this tab. If data is not available for an entire year, you can just enter zeros into all of these. They're all editable. If you have any questions, you can hover over these question marks and get a little bit more insight into what you need to input. If you have, let's say, the past 5 years as of 2020, you can change the years. But for this example, we already have preloaded data, so we're going to keep going with this. You're going to hit next, and then this is where we set our financial targets. So you can see right up here, all of our default targets. These are what all of the targets are set to, but you can change all of them. So to access them, you press this little plus button, and then we're going to answer, did you generate the revenues you need to pay for O&M and a little for capital? We have a minimum benchmark here, and then a good practice. We're going to keep in the 1. And then if you have any questions about what this indicator is meaning, then you're going to look at the About page. You can learn more, and then you can check out the formula. Again, we're going to keep moving through this. Operating ratio excluding depreciation. Did you generate the revenues needed to pay for O&M by itself? Again, the formula is here. We did just talk about it, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. If you need to know more about this indicator, check here. And then our minimum benchmark is 1, and a good practice is going to be 1.5. Debt service coverage. Did you generate the revenues needed to pay for O&M and existing debt service? So I hate to sound like a broken record, but about formula, minimum benchmarks, and then here we have a helpful hint. So many bond covenants require at least 1.2. So we've changed this to 1.2 here and not the minimum benchmark. To change anything in here, you can either delete it and literally put in whatever you want to, or you can manually use this button. Quick ratio. So do you have enough liquidity to pay your current liabilities at the end of the year? This target is set to 2, and it's found by dividing current assets by current liabilities. And to see everything, you have to press the plus button, and then to close it, you can hit the minus button. Days cash on hand. How many days could you continue to operate the utility with the cash levels available? So you want more than enough to last a billing cycle, or when you expect a substantial inflow of cash, and a good practice is several months. Here we have 6 months again, about and formula located there. And then the last indicator is going to be percent capital assets depreciated. So how much of your utilities assets have depreciated or are nearing the end of their lives. So it says here you do not want to get close to 100%, because that means 100% of your utilities assets have depreciated. And you know, we don't want that. So next we're going to hit submit, and this pop-up will pop up and you'll be able to see key financial indicators. So here's the main dashboard. You can see how all of these different financial indicators have trended over the past 5 years. This line here is your target. Your target is also located up here, and then you can see the trend here. So you have operating ratio, including and excluding depreciation, debt service coverage ratio, quick ratio, days cash on hand, and then capital assets depreciated. Again, the dotted line will show you where your target is, and the main line is going to be showing you where your utility is. Then you can check out all of these different tabs and go more into detail on like these specific indicators. So operating ratio, including depreciation. You're answering this question, it'll tell you what your target is. You can see this graph again, the formula, and then if your box is green, it means that your target score was met. If it's red, it means the target score was missed. For the trend box, it's going to indicate that your score improved if it's in green, and if it's red, it means that your score has regressed. So you can see here, if it was for 2018, you could see that this box would be green, and so would this box. If you were here, it would be green, you're not depreciating, or you're not going down, and then from 2019 to 2020, this box would be red, but this box would still be green. If you have any questions about that, I will answer them at the end. The next thing we're going to look at is the operating ratio, excluding depreciation for Raleigh. Again, your target is here. These boxes are green, which means that it's not trending downwards. Debt service coverage ratio. So this is the first time where you see a red box. So the reason that you see a red box is because since 2020, your debt service coverage ratio has decreased, and it shows you how much it's decreased here, and it will give you an alert that it is red, and show you that it has regressed. The quick ratio for Raleigh is looking good. It's been trending upwards, and you've definitely met the target. Days cash on hand. You can see that Raleigh has 1,487 days cash on hand, which is really impressive. Definitely not relevant for a lot of people, but there's that, it's green, and you can see how much this line is trending upwards. And then the last one we're going to look at is the capital assets depreciated. So the score is 0.41, which is higher than 0.35. It means 41% of your assets have depreciated. And then this box is 0 because it's still above, and it's just trending. It's continuing on its trend. So now you can go back to the dashboard, and what's really cool is you can download the financial health checkup tool. So when you download that, you're going to get an Excel. Hold up, I'm gonna have to do this. So this is gonna be the Excel version. This is what pops out at the very end. You have all of your financial fields and everything that you've entered. You can look at what your targets are set at. You can check out your key financial indicators. They're all calculated here and outputted here. And then here's your dashboard. So you can have all of these maps or all of these graphs on hand. All right. So then the next thing I want to talk about is if you're a North Carolina utility and you are going to do the Excel version. So if you have used the tool before, you can upload an old financial health checkup report, which contains more up-to-date financial data. If not, you have to download the template and fill it out. You have to make sure that you fill out the financial history tab as well as the financial targets tab, and then you have to re-upload it. So I'm going to run through this with you. So you download it, you pull it up, and this is what it looks like. So you can save this directly to your desktop. I'm gonna hit save as, and I'll save it to my desktop. I'll X out of this, and then you can re-upload it. It'll show you that your upload has completed, and then it will output everything that's in that Excel sheet down here. And then you can see your targets here as well. So you hit see dashboard, and then you get the exact same information as if you had done it manually by entering it. You can download the report this way as well. Okay, going back home, now we're gonna talk about what the difference is between a North Carolina utility versus an out-of-state utility. And the answer is genuinely nothing is different other than all of these are gonna be blank and you have to input them yourself. And then the last thing we're gonna go through is the help tab. So if you need help with financial statements or financials, you're gonna go here, you can click here and see where we typically find these indicators. So operating revenues is found here on this line item, and then total operating expenses and depreciation are found here. Debt principal payments are typically found on a different page, and you can find them here. This is a North Carolina example, and I want you guys to note that as well. Everyone's comprehensive annual financial report or audited financial statements are going to look different, but this is just what we're working with. So 4 and 4B are here. For current assets, you do have to do a minor calculation. So you have to take the total current assets and subtract inventories, restricted cash, and prepaids. So here you see total current assets, and you're subtracting prepaid items and restricted cash and cash equivalents. And then for current liabilities, you have to exclude deposits and bond anticipation notes. And so here we have total current liabilities without the customer deposits. And then the last sheet we have is going to be for 8 and 9, total accumulated depreciation and total depreciated capital assets. And those are just line items here in your financial statements. And that is going to be the end of my demo. So wrapping up if you have any questions or want to know specifics about your state, you can check out EPA's CWSRF fact sheets, the EFC SRF switchboard, network funding tables. And then in addition to that, our EFC has tools, the EFC network has tools. They're both linked here. So we just went over the financial health checkup tool, and eventually we will be demoing some of our other tools and future webinars. If you need help using them, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're also updating a lot of our old Excel tools to be more accessible for those without Microsoft Suite, and just to be a little bit more intuitive. And we're currently looking for small wastewater communities to provide technical assistance. The UNC EFC is currently offering free one-on-one technical assistance for systems providing wastewater services for up to 1 million gallons per day. TAs that we provide is help with financial health, affordability assessments, rates analysis, funding assistance, payment plan assistance, and partnership guidance. So please don't hesitate to reach out to either the EFC network or the UNC EFC. We would love to help you. And if we specifically can't help you, we can refer you elsewhere. And that is all. So I think it's time for some questions. And this is my contact information and our general UNC EFC's email, website, and social media.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Melanie. That was a great demo and a great presentation. It doesn't look like we have any questions at the moment, so I will keep watching that if any roll in.
Okay, perfect.
But so in case anyone has to jump off, I'll just briefly mention that following the session, everyone who attended today is going to receive a copy of the slides and today's recording. So if there's anything you want to go back and refer to or re-watch or click any of these links, you'll have access to them. Oh, yep, and I just saw a question come in about that. So, yep, you'll receive all of the materials today. We also ask that you complete our evaluation that will automatically pop up after I end the webinar today. But we ask that you let us know your thoughts on today's session, as this helps us plan future webinars on topics that matter to you, which is really what we're here to do. So we look forward to hearing your feedback. We'll stay on maybe a moment longer for questions. Oh, we got one question that came in. So using the tool, how do you estimate depreciation if different assets have different time frames and are in different condition?
So typically, we specifically find depreciation in financial audited reports. So this is something that an auditor will do, and they will get that information for you. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I know no one can speak, so it would be a.
No, I'm watching. Yeah, I think it answered that question.
Okay.
And if not, you can always reach out, and if that needs to be a more in-depth conversation, I have that as well. Well, I don't think anyone will complain if we wrap up a few minutes early. But if any questions come up after the fact, feel free to drop those in the evaluation as well. We always look and we try to answer them in a follow-up if we can. So I'll be on the lookout for those. But thank you so much, Melanie, for presenting with us today. And yeah, I hope everyone has a good rest of the day. And Melanie, do you have any last final thoughts for our audience today?
No, thank you all for coming. I'm very happy that I was able to demo our new tool. And again, feel free to reach out to me specifically or anyone in the EFC network or the UNC EFC.
Wonderful. And thank you so much. And I hope everyone enjoys their weekend. We're almost there.
Thank you.
Take care.